Alright, so I was looking around the internet the other day to find a video idea, and I came across this really disturbing theory on Reddit with a really dramatic title. The 2022 real estate collapse is going to be worse than the 2008 one, and nobody knows about it. Time to call your mom. Alright, one sec.
Да, Люсина.
Hi, Mom. So, someone on the internet says that the world is coming to an end. Again.
Да ты что?
Alright, in today's video, I want to talk about this housing crash theory that's going around the internet. Now first, I want to say that normally I'm not someone who pays much attention to these kind of things because there's always someone on the internet talking about the market coming to an end, and eventually one of them turns out to be right, just like a broken clock is right twice a day. But this theory specifically stood out to me because of this chart right here. It's the comparison between something called margin debt and the median price of homes sold. And you can see just how close these two charts really are. And this is disturbing because margin debt is extremely risky. So if the reason why housing values are going up is because investors are taking on more risk at a decreasing amount of profit margin thanks to interest rates now going higher, then that's a bad sign because the last thing we want to do is turn the real estate market into a casino. So I continued reading, and by the end of it I thought, that's a very interesting theory. Secondly, I want to give credit to the Super Stonk subreddit, which is where I first saw this theory, and contrary to the dramatic title, I think it's a really well-researched thesis that brings up a few really good points. But it's also very complex, and sometimes my brain is really smooth, so hopefully by the end of this video we can get our brains to be a little bit more wrinklier, and even if this theory is wrong, I think you'll still learn a lot by the end of it. Or you might not. But you'll probably still waste 15 minutes one way or another somewhere, and what better way is there to waste it than talking about macroeconomics? Am I right? Let's just get right into it. Hi, my name is Andrei Jikh. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay for the film theory. Now, if I sound a little bit different today, it's because I feel a little under the weather. And also I want to say that this theory is not necessarily something that I personally subscribe to, like you should my channel. Something in my eye. I just want to help explain a really popular theory that people are talking about on the internet. And the first reason behind why this theory suggests that 2022 will be worse than 2008 is because of something called CMBSs, commercial mortgage-backed securities, which are loans for commercial buildings, things like businesses, malls, and things like that are then packaged up and sold off as investments for other investors to buy and invest in. But here's where the first problem comes in. When Wall Street buys real estate, they're usually subject to one risk assessment, which is assets under management, or AUM. This is the amount of money that they are managing for their investors. So it's essentially like them coming up to a bank and saying, hey, here's the size of my wallet. Can I get a loan now? And they get their loan and they go and buy real estate. But the truth behind the risks assessed with real estate is that it has less to do with the size of your wallet and more to do with things like rental rates and real estate values and stock values and local conditions like crime rates and other things that have nothing to do with the size of the wallet. So that's the first small risk. But the second risk is a lot bigger, and that is how they solve the problem of liquidity. One of the reasons why big banks, institutions, and hedge funds can borrow an insane amount of money is also because of their ability to shuffle money around really, really fast from A to B. Now, this was not money or fast. I just thought it was a cool card trick. And they could do this with assets like commercial mortgage-backed securities and or derivatives. Now this solves the problem of liquidity. And this is a good thing because it allows them to force the sale of an asset really, really fast. So if I'm a lender and I want my money back because my borrower is not paying me back, then I can force the sale of that asset to get my money back really, really fast. But that's the theory. And here's where the problem comes in. The derivatives market is estimated to be anywhere between $500 trillion to $1 quadrillion. This is an insane amount of money because derivatives are a fugazi, it's a fugazi, it's a wazi, it's a woozy. It's just imaginary value we created out of nothing because derivatives are nothing more than like if you and I made a bet that you would smash the like button on this video, and someone else came along and made a bet on our bet, and then someone else came along and made a bet on that person's bet, making a bet on our bet. That's how we've turned this thing into a casino. But the real problem comes in because these derivatives can actually be used as proof of funds or collateral to borrow more money. So if I'm a borrower, I could be like, I have a $5 billion bet with this other person over here. And if I can't pay you back, don't worry, I'll sell my bet to another sucker and just give you back the money real fast. So it's like going to the casino with borrowed money to ask the casino for more borrowed money, and then you go gamble and they give you the money because you have borrowed money and now you're playing with the borrowed money. It's crazy. So leverage gone bad is what could trigger a derivatives market to collapse. For For example, if Goldman Sachs is leveraged 200 to 1, which by the way is not a hypothetical, that is the actual amount of money they can leverage as of their last filing, that means for every $1 they have, they can borrow $200 against it. And that $1 is not just sitting there in their bank account, it's taking on risk. It's being invested somewhere. And if the value of that dollar fluctuates and goes down to, let's say 50 cents, as we're seeing in the tech sector that's being destroyed, the stock market is in a bear market, there's a lot of risk going on. If they can't put up that extra collateral to make sure their loan is in good standing, then they have to sell one of their assets to pay for it. Now, right now, according to this theory, the biggest mistake that people are making about real estate is this. First, a quick word from today's sponsor, Oura Ring. Oura Ring allows you to track your sleep because good health starts with good sleep. Because good sleep helps prevent illness and disease, it supports weight management, it helps reduce stress levels, helps you to think more clearly, and just like good habits with investing, it starts by tracking your progress. It also has advanced health sensors, a 7-day battery life, water and extreme temperature resistance, and it also provides early sickness detection, sometimes before symptoms even show up, which is just crazy. I absolutely love the sleek design. I love how light it is. It weighs as much as a nickel, and it comes in timeless colors, which is perfect for every occasion, from work to workout to night out. And the one thing I'm most excited about is to wake up the next morning and check my sleep data. Like for example, yesterday I saw that I got 9 hours of sleep and that I'm a very efficient sleeper at 93%. But yesterday I only got 5 hours and 14 minutes of sleep, and I really need to watch it, and I shouldn't be making YouTube videos right now because I'm sick. You can get the ring at the link in the description below the video, where you will also get 6 months of free membership to your health insights and data. So go check out Oura Ring. It might become your new favorite investment. Now let's get back to the video. The mistake people are making about real estate right now, according to this theory, is that we've lulled ourselves into a false sense of security. And you might have heard people talk about real estate in the sense that nowadays we don't do ninja loans, no income, no job or assets. We have a lot tighter lending restrictions. There's also more equity in housing. There's a lot more demand, less inventory. So all of that will be absorbed, so we're protected. But according to this theory, if you're a cash buyer, for example, some of the rules go out the window. Now, this is a true personal story. The last house that I bought, I showed the bank cash, but I still went to go get a loan on it. Now, they looked at things like my income, but they've also looked at the value of my assets, which obviously fluctuate up and down in value. So the argument being made here is that the use of margin and equity-backed loans by both retail and institutional investors has fused two separate markets together that were never meant to be, like the liquid but very risky and volatile stock market alongside the illiquid but very stable real estate market, and it sort of fused them together a la Go Tank style, but not even the fit version, that one. And if you need proof of this, the author cites this margin debt chart right here, which looks very, very close to the home value chart. So the thesis here is that we are using inflated loans to fuel other inflated loans. And it's this feedback loop that goes up really, really fast and then crashes really, really hard. And here's a specific example of how it can go south for investors really fast. Let's get nerdy and use some numbers. Let's talk about something called cap rates. Cap rates is just one of the ways that investors like to figure out how risky something is and how valuable that investment could be. The higher the cap rate is, the more money they could end up making, but also the more risky that thing is. And to figure out the cap rate, you take the NOI, the net operating income per year, and you divide it by the property value. Now, for the last 10 years, we've been in a positive leverage environment, meaning we could go to the bank, borrow some money, and make money on that borrowed money while still paying off our loan and keeping some for ourselves. But obviously Papa Powell rug pulled us, right? Now that's becoming a lot harder. Let's say some institution decides to buy $1 million commercial property at a 2.5% cap rate. That means they expect to make $25,000 a year in rental income. And let's say they borrowed 65% of that $1 million at 2.5%. Well, that means that it's costing them $16,250 a year to pay for their loan, because that's what 2.5% of $650K is. Now, let's say interest rates doubled. Well, now it's gonna cost them $32,500 per year to pay their loan, which means they just went from making money to now losing $7,500 per year because 2/3 of their loan just got twice as expensive. And obviously, investors don't wanna be in that position, so they tend to sell off that which is not making them money. And the thesis also argues that the pandemic really accelerated this because now companies are realizing they don't need their employees to show up to work, so why would they pay huge leases on something they're not even using. Now, there's other approaches to valuing real estate based on cash flow that a lot of investors use, but there's also other things like, for example, the market approach, which uses comps to see what other homes like that one have sold for in the area. And then there's, of course, the replacement cost, which is how much it would cost to basically replace the whole thing and build it from scratch. So there's different methods to value real estate, and you have to use many of them to find the actual value of a house. So the one thing I will say is against the author's thesis is that cap rates and interest rates are not always moving in sync. And there's plenty of studies that show that the correlation between the two is not as tight as some people think, which means that things could be not as bad as some people imagine. But it does get a little bit trickier with something called DSCR, which is debt service coverage ratio. This means a lot of commercial lenders will want to see some kind of margin on your profit. So for example, if it costs you $1,000 a month to pay for your loan, the bank doesn't want to see you make only $1,000 a month. It wants to see you make just a little bit more, which is where this coverage ratio comes in. And for commercial real estate, that starts somewhere around 1.25x. So again, if it costs you $1,000 a month, they want to see you make at least $1,250 a month to stay compliant. And this compliance test comes every month. And if you fail the compliance test, they have to reclassify your loan as something that's more risky, so that when they package your loan and sell it off as an investment a la commercial mortgage-backed security to someone else, that someone else would hopefully know how safe or risky you actually are. The author says, though, that the problem underneath all that is that these rating systems are not always accurate and they're not always up to date. Like, for example, Evergrande. Evergrande was one of China's largest real estate developers, and they haven't been able to make a single payment since September of last year. In fact, they just missed their last $2.1 billion payment. So when that happens, you would then expect the credit agencies to label Evergrande as D, in default, the worst possible rating anyone could have. But that's not always the case. Sometimes they wait far too long and they don't actually reveal the details of this until much later. So it's like the equivalent of tricking investors into thinking they're holding gold when in reality they could be holding copper. Now, according to this theory behind the speculation of why this hasn't happened yet is because it could potentially trigger this wave of sell-offs and margin calls in the CMBS and derivatives market. Now, Evergrande is just one of many examples that we actually don't know the extent of how bad it is. But the speculation here is that the reason this ties to the US market is because the same people who hold that debt of trillions of dollars in the equities market took out a margin loan against it to buy trillions of dollars of US housing. So it's like they used risky and volatile assets to qualify for loans to buy stable but highly illiquid real estate in the US. And that's why their fates are somewhat tied together. Now, if your head is spinning after watching all of that, I don't blame you. Here's the TLDW, too long, didn't watch, Andrei. In 2008, the unknown weapons of financial card destruction were things like subprime mortgage loans, MBSs, CDs, CDOs, all packaged up as toxic investments and sold all around the world to unknowing investors. In 2022, according to this theory, it's things like margin loans, asset-backed loans, things like toxic investments and bonds that are mislabeled by the credit agencies, and of course the cash purchased assets, which obviously depend on those assets' values holding strong, because if they don't, they could get margin called, which means they have to pay for them by selling off those assets. That's why some people believe that in 2019, the market should have crashed, but it didn't, because the Fed stepped in and guaranteed everyone's overnight repo rates because all the banks were like, you, I don't trust you. Maybe you hold toxic assets. I don't want to do business with you. So the Fed had to step in and act like a parent to help everyone out. And according to this theory, it's kind of happening again, but in a different form. My personal opinion is that this thesis does bring up a lot of great points, but also it has a lot of assumptions built into it that aren't necessarily backed by any data. It's just using evidence here and there, things like Evergrande, but there could be other companies like Evergrande, and who knows to what extent our companies are entrenched in this situation. This is not data that I can show because it doesn't really exist. So we just have to make an assumption and hope that we're right, but at the end of the day, we're taking a shot in the dark just to see if this theory is true or not. So at the end of the day, this could be completely false and none of this happens at all. But if this theory does unravel, then I also don't think it has to happen as fast as it did in 2008. Maybe commercial real estate or maybe residential real estate stays flat or declines in value over the next decade. No one really knows. But one thing is true. If you're someone who's buying a house to live in, especially right now, and you're happy with your interest rate and the numbers make sense and you're taking out a loan for the long term for 30 years, it doesn't really matter what your house is worth, because at the end of the day, a house will always be a house. As always, have a wonderful rest of your day. Smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Go grab up to $250 worth of free Bitcoin with this BlockFi link right here. Go get your free stocks, links are down below, and then go track them automatically with the spreadsheet link down below on my Patreon. And I would love to know your thoughts on this thesis. I hope some of it made sense. Either way, love you. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you back here on Monday and Friday, sometimes a Wednesday. Bye-bye.